And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go in to the breach on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Remember, the chat room is open. The only social media out there worth actually socializing in is on the Crusade channel at crusadechannel.com/chat. Please, we emphasize to everyone, become a Founders Pass member. If you go to crusadechannel.com, you'll see all the links there where you could preview the channel. You got Frontline with Joe and Joe, but we're not the only ones there, to say the least. Obviously, King Dude himself, Mike Church, Rick Barrett, Kennedy Hall. It's a great lineup. It's a great station. It's a great and needed station. So if you can become Founders Pass members, you're not going to be disappointed. And follow Joe and I wherever you find us on social media. We're all over the place. So primarily right now, YouTube and Facebook, but you can find us on Gab. You can find us on Rumble and a bunch of other places. So wherever you see our jersey mugs, all right, do something to help us out. Like, subscribe, share. And also, if you want to drop in a couple bucks at Patreon, we're at patreon.com /the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Ristinello, and to all the people out there at the Crusade channel, I hate to sound like a leftist, all right, because leftists say things like, I'm so ashamed to be an American, okay, but they never have a reason to be ashamed. Like, Donald Trump grabbed Stormy Daniels' breasts, and I'm supposed to be ashamed to be an American. So it's something ridiculous. I am disgusted as an American right now. I'm disgusted. Like, it's one thing that we had to tolerate all the nonsense that went on back in November, okay? This guy's a disaster. Joe, this guy has gone from a joke to a dangerous man. And the people that are handling him are dangerous people, because they're allowing some dangerous things to happen over there in Afghanistan. And we're going to talk about it, not the least of which. And listen, this doesn't come as a shock to Joe and all the good people at the Crusade channel. Not the least of which is that Christians over there in Afghanistan are going to get slaughtered. Slaughtered, Joe. And we got to pray for them, okay? David Marcus, who's always spot on, he calls Biden the disappearing president, okay? There's a shock. Joe Biden disappearing into his basement. Okay, so we're going to talk about that. I don't know why, Joe Ristinello, we take Facebook so seriously. Like, who are they to form an election commission?
Scary.
I want to form the Joe and Joe election commission. All right. And I want to put in all sorts of requests with the federal government, and I want to subpoena records, and I want to do all sorts of things. Why, if Zuckerberg could do it as a publicly traded company, Joe and I can't do it? Well, you know what? We're going to talk about that. We do have to talk about, even though I don't think it's beating a dead horse, I think it's something important to talk about. What are we looking at if, in fact, Roe versus Wade gets overturned? I think it's an important question. A lot of people out there, Joe, they don't know. God bless them. They don't know what it means to have Roe versus Wade overturned. They don't know what the implications are. Well, that's why we're here, because we're going to break that down. Joe, in our lifetimes, when you and I went to school, we learned about Nazis. Didn't really learn about communists, because most of their comrades were in the public school system. And certainly that's the way it is now. But later on, you learned about Stalin. You learned about Mao. Certainly you learned about Hitler. You learned about history's tyrants. Joe, Chinese Communist Party, they are a brutal, murderous, evil regime. That's what they are. There is no way to talk around. There is no difference between Xi Jinping and Mao. What, numbers? The numbers of people that Mao killed? What does that mean? The impulse is the same. The evil is as profound and dark. And we have to talk about that. We're going to talk about the sexual revolution. We have on our Veritas Catholic Radio Network, we're going to be talking to E. Michael Jones. Michael Jones is all over this. Sexual liberation as a form of political control. Let me tell you something. These people, Joe, that are on these sites and participating in these sites, they don't realize just how enslaved they are. But we're gonna tell them. Hopefully they'll listen, but we're gonna tell them. And they probably won't get to it all. And the other one that I really love to talk about, Joe Ristinello, is, now I don't get this. I wish people would just stand up to places like Harvard just named an atheist as their head chaplain. But we're the dumb ones, Joe. You and I. We're the dumb ones because we at least know what words mean. A chaplain implies religion. Could be a Muslim, you could be a Christian, could be a Jew, but you say a chaplain, and generally speaking, you do mean a Christian. But I'm sorry, an atheist is disqualified from being a chaplain, and we're going to talk about that too, and maybe we'll get to a few other things that are going on out there. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Joe Arsinello, and let's have a lively conversation on the Crusade channel.
As always, as Joe said, we were talking in the very beginning of this show, and we talked a little bit about it last week about Afghanistan. It's a very sad situation. I think we failed both morally as well as strategically with regard to exiting. I mean, one can't necessarily fault Joe Biden for getting out of Afghanistan. At the same time, we can, I think, objectively speaking, fault him for how it was done. Again, I think it was a moral as well as a strategic failure. But let's talk about the Christians that are being turned away at the airport. We came across this story in the National Catholic Register. I think it's an important thing to highlight. Basically, as far as this story goes, I'll just give you a little taste and then we'll just comment on it. Adding to the rising anxiety of Christians and other religious groups whose faith places them in extreme danger with regard to the Taliban's persecution is the State Department's P2 designation. Now, pay attention to the wording. For certain priority evacuees. It does not specifically include Christians or other members of religious minorities. The designation currently gives priority to women at risk, journalists, academics, pilots, and minority populations, among others. The U.S. Commission of Religious Freedom, which is an independent bipartisan U.S. federal government commission, called for the Biden administration to broaden the designation, obviously to broaden minority populations, because words matter, to explicitly include Afghan religious minorities, which would be Christians, in recognition of the severe risks they already face, which will only be heightened after the end of the U.S. evacuation. You know, I personally think that this should be as clear as day on that priority list. They're going to get slaughtered, period.
Joe, that's history 101, brother.
Absolutely. I mean,
that's history 101. What did you think? What do you think is going to happen when we are all pulled out? What do you think the Taliban's going to do? Play nice with their neighbors? They didn't do it before. You expect them to do it now? And who are they going to take it out on? They're going to take it out on the Christians. But remember, Joe Biden, he's a devout Catholic. All right. How about we give him the benefit of the doubt? Well, you better be defending those Christians, or you better order the State Department, as it says in this article. You better order the State Department to broaden that definition so that you could get those people out. Because, as you said, history 101, they're going to get slaughtered. The Taliban is going to get, which they probably are, very vengeful. They're going to turn inwards, and it's going to be the Christians that are going to be the ones that get the chop.
I mean, that's already happening in countries like Nigeria. It's happening in the Sudan. I mean, that is happening as we speak. I mean, or throughout the world. I mean, if you look at
Joe, do you know why I have no respect for the left in America, for all their moralizing that we have to hear ad nauseum, all their moralizing? There's such evil people in the world. Donald Trump, he grabbed Stormy Daniels' breast because of people like that, who voted for people like Barack Obama, who went out and voted for people like Joe Biden, and we put up with them. There have been absolute atrocities in the world, particularly against Christians, and nothing gets said.
Well, you mentioned...
real quick, and I'll let you go. Guaranteed, if one of these journalists dies, you're going to see it all over MSNBC and CNN. If one of these journalists dies, okay? But you see Christians getting slaughtered, don't expect the American press to say boo.
Well, they don't say boo. I mean, it goes on, like I said, in places like Nigeria and the Sudan every single day. No one says anything. I mean, particularly because they're countries that no one, frankly, care about. I hate to say that, but the press doesn't cover it. The press does not cover it. That's happening constantly. I mean, we talked about this last week. Within Muslim nations, there is a minority of radicalized, violent people. This is not my opinion. Yemen, Pakistan, Nigeria, and
Now
then you have
Afghanistan.
Afghanistan. I mean, this is not an opinion, and they will kill these people. This is a
Right,
fact. Or frankly, they will make them convert. It's just a reality. I mean,
right.
if you look at the news that comes out of Pakistan, there is some very disturbing events that take place, particularly against Christians. If you
Right.
convert from the Muslim faith to become a Christian, again, this is not me I'm just stating facts. I'm not saying all Muslims do this, but what I am saying is there are countries and there are segments of the population within those countries that are very violent and are very aggressive towards Christians.
Joe,
It's a
I don't
fact.
know why I don't know why we always have to sugarcoat it. I don't know why when we're talking about just objectively talking about history, why do we have to kowtow to Muslims? In other words, we're constantly told about the big bad Catholic Church and all the book burning and all that and what they did to poor Galileo. I mean, this is what we've been subjected to as Catholics. But if you talk about Islam's not violent past, violent founding, okay, their violent spread. I had somebody actually have the audacity to tell me when I said, well, Islam, remember, was spread by violence. In other words, that's the way it was. Muhammad was making very little progress, okay, until he unsheathed his sword, okay. Then he got people to convert, okay. And then what did they do? What did they do at the founding? They tore across North Africa. They went into they went all the way to the east. They went into the Middle East. They went into India, okay. In other words, they spread so quickly. How did they spread? Because they were preaching the gospel. They spread with the sword. That's what they did. Why do we have to back down from that history? Why can't we point out to Muslims, this is how you spread your religion? And I had somebody tell me one time, well, didn't Catholicism get spread the same way? I said, no. No, Catholicism didn't spread because people shed other people's blood. Catholicism spread because the people that were spreading the gospel allowed their own blood to be shed. They were the ones that were killed in India and killed in the Middle East, killed in Greece, killed in Italy, okay, in Rome. St. Paul and St. Peter both martyred in Rome, okay? But we can't ever point this out about Islam. Oh, you're just such an Islamophobe. Well, let me tell you something. We need a good dose of Catholic reality in this whole situation. Because honestly, no matter what anybody says, if it wasn't for the Roman Catholic Church, Europe would have been Muslim. When you think about Lepanto, when you think about Vienna, okay? The big bad Catholics are the ones that saved all the scumbag atheists and Protestants in Europe, okay? Who didn't lift a finger to fight against the Muslims. Well, maybe it's about time we do. You think, Joe?
Well, it's interesting. Someone mentioned in the chat room, and it's actually the next point I was going to bring up was Glenn Beck, his Nazarene project. To his credit, he posted a video on Instagram, and supposedly they have at least 20 large aircrafts, including 737s and 757s, with the hopes to airlift 7,000 Christians to safety. Now, that's a person putting his money where his mouth is, and frankly, I give him all the credit in the world. But why isn't the State Department basically doing that? I mean,
Right.
that you don't have to be a scholar to know that there's a history of violence against Christians, particularly in a place like Afghanistan. I mean, again, I'm not pointing fingers and I'm not being prejudiced. I'm just telling you that's just a fact. These people are going to get slaughtered. Where's the UN? Where are no, but I mean, like in all honesty, like what's the problem? And frankly, if you look at the numbers of persecuted Christians, as in who get killed, I mean, it's by far the largest group of religious that are persecuted in the world year after year. Look at the numbers.
Regardless of the category, religious or not, Christians in general, okay, all Christians in general, Christians are the most persecuted group in the world. When the gay lobby wants to talk about the Taliban throwing homosexuals off the top of buildings, okay, remember something. It's horrible, it's sad, it's tragic, and it certainly should never happen, okay? But don't cry persecution. If you're gay in the world, don't cry persecution, not to a Christian, okay? Christians are the ones being persecuted, and it's people like that, the gay lobby, the the leftist gays in America, they're not going to do anything. They don't care about Christians getting slaughtered in Afghanistan. Do you? They don't care about Uyghurs. And we'll talk about China in a little while. They don't care about Uyghurs getting oppressed in China, do they? But then we got to hear them cry all the time again about the big bad Catholic Church. They're one of the groups of people that they cry about the slightest thing. Oh, a boy can't go into a girl's room. Oh, that's real persecution. Joy Reid says you're the Taliban if you take that position. Basically, this is what we're putting up with. You're exactly right, and nobody points it out. And at least I'll give Glenn Beck a lot of credit. And I've given him credit for a long time. I've given him credit, Joe, for a long time. Back in 2010, just before I met my wife, I went down to his rally down there in Washington. The dude got up there under all sorts of death threats and everything else. No bullet. They wanted him to wear a bulletproof vest. He wouldn't do it. All right. He gave a speech. Alveda King was there. A lot of other people were there. And he put up the money for it himself. In other words, he put the money up to have this rally down at the reflecting pool down there in Washington. I give Glenn Beck a lot of credit. Do you know, I will tell you this, that by name, when I pray the rosary, when I pray for the conversion of the world, I pray for a handful of people by name to either convert or revert to the Catholic Church. Glenn Beck's one of them. We could use him in the church. Now, for his own soul, I want him to come into the Catholic Church. But just as far as a guy who is a tremendous force, I think, for good, I really pray he reverts to his Catholic faith and comes home to the Catholic Church. He's a good guy. And I hate to use the word good. I don't like using the word good, right? Because only even Jesus said, why do you call me good? I think Glenn Beck, in my opinion, my heart of hearts, Glenn Beck is a heartfelt, good Christian man. He really is.
Well, let's circle back to the P2 designation by the State Department where they say minority populations. Now, maybe they have an intention of getting Christians out. I don't know. But this is the problem with this particular regime. Clearly, their base have a bias against Christians. And you don't have to just say, like, I'm not just saying that. I'm saying that based upon people like naming Javier Becerra to like such a position who clearly has a bias against Christians, particularly Catholics. And even if they wanted to, they can't say that it is our priority to get Christians out of there. And this is where, I'll be honest with you, we've lost our humanity. And this is where what happens when someone takes God out of the picture. Listen, there are many people I necessarily don't like, but I have to love them. You see, this is like God teaches us this. You know, like Christ forgave his enemies from the cross. You can't, like, because that type of love is a choice. It's a choice. It's easy to disregard somebody like that you might not necessarily see eye to eye with, like particularly with some of the people that we talk about on the show and a couple of the subjects. You could just disregard, but that's not what a Catholic does. Right. You see, that's not who we are. And that's why you see things like this. That's why our politics have gone awry. Because there was a time where you could disagree with the other side of the aisle, but there was something that joined you together, and that was a belief in God. You just saw the world through a different lens, and you're going to hash it out. But that's no longer there. And they can't bring themselves to say, as a priority, we have to get Christians out because they're going to get slaughtered. Because why? Their base will get upset. How should that upset you? Like, I'll be honest,
because their base is a bunch of baby killing fanatics, okay, and sodomites. If you really want to bring it down to brass tacks, and Christianity to them, unless it's the liberal, very liberal Christianity, which is not Christianity at all, Christians and Christianity reminds them that they're baby killers and sodomites. That's real. I'm sorry, I know how that sounds, Joe, but that's really what it comes down to. They don't care about Christians. They don't care if they slaughter them all day long. You think, look, listen, we brought it up before. If you want to see the gay lobby in action in America, look at how they treat somebody like Andy Ngo. If you want to see that they have nothing but purely a political agenda. So if they don't care about Andy Ngo, who is gay, when he gets the crap beaten out of him by Antifa, you think they're going to pluck a hair if the Taliban chops off a few thousand heads of Christians in Afghanistan? Joe, let's take a quick break. I know that we want to continue this conversation. You're listening to the Crusade Channel, your home for the Mike Church Show, Crusade Channel News, the Barrett Brief, and the Kennedy Profession. From sun up to sundown, the Crusade Channel is the last live radio station standing. Stick around. Welcome back, everyone, to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Rossinello, way in the breach on the Crusade Channel. So you understand my point, Joe Rossinello, before the break. In other words, the left in America, they don't care about Christians. They don't care about anybody who disagrees with them politically or culturally. So you know they're not going to care about Christians getting slaughtered in Afghanistan. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Do you agree with that?
Well, they're not going to say a word. I mean, and frankly, you're probably right, Joe, and that's sad. I mean, I don't like, let's just put it this way. I don't want to see some of these people that I disagree with slaughtered. I would say, let's just say Barack Obama got killed.
Right.
I don't want to see him die. I don't want to see Joy Reid die. You know what I want to see? I want to see them both convert to the Catholic Church.
And
I mean, like,
eyes.
let's be honest. But like, this is again where things have gone like awry. You can't just agree to disagree anymore. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I have people even within my own family. I mean, they just can't put it down. Like, I don't agree with them on certain things, but sometimes you have to like look past the disagreement and look at the humanity of the other person. And that's only with God. You only do that with God.
Joe, amen, brother. And that's the truth. And that's what we got to say. You remember what E. Michael Jones said to us, the analogy he gave when we interviewed him? He said, it's like pulling down the shade and there's, there's like pinpricks in the shade. So little rays come in, and you made the best point to him and he agreed with you. Those little rays, that's your identity politics, because people are so afraid to just lift the shade so that you could see the fullness of the light. They just want to see that little bit. And anything outside of that, you're anathema, whether it's the left or whether it's the right, because that's all they see is through that one ray that comes through that one little pinprick in the shade, rather than say, you know what, I'm going to open up the whole thing because I want to see everything clearly. People are afraid to do that, Joe Rossinello, and that's a problem. That's a problem. And the left in America, and don't get me wrong, I'm not just beating them up, but particularly on this story, the left in America, that little pinprick and that shade to them is that we don't like Christians, and in their warped mind, because they don't like the way I live my life. Therefore, I don't care if they die. And that's the truth, Joe. That's the truth.
Well, I think, to be truthful with you, like, that's one thing that the Catholic Church does do. Including for myself, it puts a mirror in front of you. And if you are a person that's reflective and introspective, and you could say, well, I didn't do that well, or I could do better here, I think you're open, or more open, to the Catholic Church than opposed to someone who's just like, listen, I'm dug in. I don't care. Even if this thing that I'm doing is doing me harm, and it is, I don't care. And frankly, you're attacking me, even though you're not attacking them. They feel that.
Right.
It's like oil and water. It just doesn't mix. It doesn't mix. And
Right.
frankly, that's what's sad. And that's where we're at. I mean, we've said this on other shows. I mean, John Adams says our democracy doesn't work if the people are amoral. And that's, frankly, we talked about that last week. We have an amoral society. And I'm not talking about, listen, I'm a part of this society, and I'm clearly not a perfect person, but we're not grounded in anything anymore.
Right.
And frankly, this is what you get. I mean, this is what you get when you're not grounded in anything.
Joe, listen, if there's one, it bothers me when certain lines, you want to call them lines, get repeated over and over in the culture war. That's one line that you can never repeat too often. John Adams, the John Adams quote that you said. Our Constitution does not work in the absence of a moral people. We need to say it over and over again. Look at what the immoral, you call them amoral, I call them immoral. When you're for baby killing, you're immoral. When you want to turn the whole country upside down, our government upside down, our institutions upside down, our universities upside down, our entertainment industry upside down, also that you could keep killing babies, you're not amoral, you're immoral. And our Constitution, Joe, doesn't work with those people because they will do anything. They'll tear down any institution in America. They'll tear down any compact, any document, so that they can keep doing what they want.
Well,
That's the truth.
The abortion issue comes down to, again, it comes down to sex. I mean, people want to have recreational sex and they're not willing to put that down. I mean, to live as a Catholic, you have to live a chaste life. I mean, sex is contained within marriage, and in marriage, it's open to life. That's to live as a Catholic. I mean, that's not my definition. That's the definition of the Catholic Church. If you want to engage in sexual intercourse, it has to be within the marriage covenant and has to be open to life. Now, why won't people go along with that? One, they want pleasure. And two, even if they're married, they want to live a life for themselves. Let's be honest. When you have children, especially a number of children, the self disappears. And that's the idea. You see, that's the idea. And that's the path to heaven. You see, this is, again, but the path to heaven goes against the path of the world. The two don't mesh. And people are trying to build their kingdom here. And they make that very clear by their choices. It's very clear.
But the sad part about it, Joe, all right, here at the Crusade Channel, the Frontline with Joe and Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello, Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. You know, the sad part about it is that we know that is the Christian message. You know, long is the way and hard that out of darkness leads up to light. The road, you know, the wide road as opposed to the narrow road. But in America, it seems to me that you said it, you hit the nail on the head. Our problem is, and this goes for the right too, okay? They want their pleasure. They want their pleasure, and they don't want to put anything down. There is no sacrifice. Let me tell you a quick story. Most people out there know, and if you don't, please pray for me. Now, Joe's got 4 kids and 1 on the way, okay? And on the other side of this wall, where I'm broadcasting from on my end, all right, there's a foster child, all right, 12-year-old, who I'm praying will become my son. Joe, he's been with us for a month. I'm 53 years old, okay? I didn't know what it was like to have to raise a child, okay? What you just said about sacrifice and disappearing to yourself, I'm starting to get a firsthand experience about what that's all about. I can't do what I want, Joe. And again, this is an older kid. He's 12 years old, all right? Still doesn't need me to, but it's still, my weekends aren't mine over the last month, okay? Now, I had COVID, leaving that aside. No, because there's a kid here. Where am I going? Going out to dinner with the wife? No, we got to do something else. Got to take care of the kid. You know, I'm only saying that as an example, and I'm just getting a glimpse of it. He's not even my son yet, okay? And we want to adopt more. And I'm 53, and again, it's one of those things that hits you right in the face. Well, guess what? Can't really think too selfishly, but that's what you were talking about. That's the problem in America. In America, including Christians, we think too selfishly.
But truthfully, when you give of yourself that way, you have the deepest joy. You see, that's the paradox of it. You know, like, it's built into us. That doesn't make it easy. But when you give of yourself, there is a joy. You see, this is the gift that the world can't give. And that's, again, God lays out this plan for us for our own benefit. But again, we, as in the human race, fight against it. We balk at God the Father. It's just who we are. We did it from the beginning. But this is where Americanism goes against what true Catholicism is. I mean, how many times have you heard people that you know, they'll be like, one and done, or I'm snipping. Like, recently I ran into somebody at the diner, a lifelong friend. And I'm like, they're like, how's your wife? How's your kids? I'm like, oh, I'm expecting my 5th kid. They're just like, dude, get a TV. Like, stop. You know what I mean? Like this is just, again, what the idea, why is that? Because again, I want to have pleasure now. Now I have pleasure in my family. Is it hard? Oh yes, it's the hardest thing on earth. But it's in dying to self that we basically find life. Christ says this in the gospel. In order for the seed to bear fruit, it must die. That's the path to heaven. You see,
Right.
that's where the Americanism clouds heaven. Everyone's in heaven. Well, did you die to yourself? You know, everyone is called. Not everyone is going to have a red martyrdom, but I got news for you. If you think you're going into heaven and you didn't experience a white martyrdom to a degree, I got news for you. You might find yourself on the other side of the wall. I mean, and you could do that as a single person. You could do that as as a married person, and you could do that as a religious person. We're called to die to ourselves, to live for others, and grace enables us to do it.
Right.
And
Right.
this is, and children and marriage, which is one particular vocation, is the vehicle by which you die to yourself. You see, Americans don't have an idea of what marriage is. Like I said, I've taught it in
But we,
pre-K, and they just don't
but
understand the
no,
institution.
we've obliterated that since the sexual revolution in the 1960s. People don't understand what marriage is. Marriage is a marriage used to be you had to show cause if you wanted to get a divorce. Then you got no fault divorce came along. Okay, that means you get married. Let's say a woman, yeah, because there's a lot of scumbag women out there. There are, and who just look to get married and take advantage of the divorce laws. They go out and marry a rich guy. They marry him for 10 years. They come up with some. They don't even need an excuse. They get some Gloria Allred type attorney to represent them, and they take half the guy's money. That's marriage in modern America. All right. And don't talk to me about evangelicals and Christians in America. Don't talk to me about Catholics. Okay. Because they're just as bad because they don't want to give up anything. You know, Catholics who contracept and evangelicals who contracept, when they take a selfless act and they turn it into a selfish act, when you take from your spouse rather than giving to your spouse, we know what the game is. But then when you say that, you know what? People don't want to hear it. People don't want to hear it. I know I didn't want to hear it for 20 years. But the Lord opened my ears. In other words, there's a right and a wrong way. We were talking again about with Michael Jones about logos. Okay, there's a logos to life, and in the sexual arena, it's like you said, it's within the context of the marriage, unitive and procreative, and that's the way it is. Anything outside of that is anti-logos and will lead to problems for you. And do we really need to illustrate for people? In other words, the problems of the sexual revolution of the 1960s. See, the problem with it getting back to, and I love your opinion on this, the problem getting back to Afghanistan, first of all, the Taliban and people like them are miserable. Okay. My attitude, Joe, is very simple. If somebody wants to go to hell, I could say what I want. Okay. But if you're intent on going there, well, go. I will not let you corrupt our kids. So don't expect that I'm going to do that. And in that way, I agree with Muslims. We shouldn't allow our children to be corrupted. Okay. But at the end of the day, what it comes down to is, and what they need to understand, some people just don't care, and they don't care about their own souls. They want what they want, and they want it now. And outside of those safeguards, when you safeguard society from things like pornography, which we're against, abortion, the gender ideology, and all that, once you shelter your kids from that, then at some point you say, okay. In other words, you're still going to go do what you want, sexually liberated woman or man. You're going to go out there and have sex. It's just an activity for you. All right. But at least you set the boundaries. All right. And then protect your own, because people are going to do what they're going to do. And you pray that they're like the prodigal son and they eventually come home. But, you know, that's the problem with the Taliban, though, because they're miserable. See, we're not miserable. We're joyful because we're Catholics. Okay. They're miserable. And anybody who they come up against who disagrees with them, their first reaction is violence. Their first reaction is the sword. That's why they throw homosexuals off buildings. You know, seriously. And that's the fate that these Christians are going to suffer if something doesn't get done. That's what you're dealing with over there. And it's a shame, Joe.
When you talk about like misery, I mean, ultimately, it's baked into the DNA of all people, the natural law. You know, this is a theme that comes up a lot with us, but it's true. I mean, you figure that out through trial and error, most people, because most people don't listen. And you learn You can't have your cake and eat it too. If you haven't figured that out by 30, most likely you're not going to figure it out. It just, you can't. It's like being like to be honest with you, say a daily communicant. You go to church, you're in a state of grace, receive the Eucharist, and when you do that, your life is absolutely positively different than if you did not do that. You feel better, you feel peace, you sleep, you have joy. But here's the thing: if you're doing that and you decide to do something completely nuts, you can't have both.
Right.
You're giving one thing up. You see, that's the thing that a lot of people in life, like, they go through the motions. They think through the motions. They think they can. You're not fooling anybody, particularly God. You know, like no one is fooling God. He sees everything. That doesn't mean, obviously, we're all not perfect. But the point is, you can't have your cake and eat it too in this life. And I much rather have, I've come to this decision as an adult, the things and the goodness that comes from living a good life or attempting to, than frankly the superficial things that come from living a worldly life. I mean, this is said in the Bible. It talks about like the eating something that's sinful. This is, I believe, Old Testament. It tastes good, but then it sours the stomach. That's very true. It's like eating a bag of Doritos. If you're starving, the first few taste good. You eat the whole bag, you're sick. If you go to White Castle, the first doubles that you eat, double cheeseburgers, taste good. Eat 6 double cheeseburgers at White Castle. Tell me how you feel.
Right.
It's like drinking Mad Dog 2020. I mean, you know, it'll make you sick. It's
Right.
the same thing. But people think for some reason, like, you know, as life goes on, this is what I'm talking about. Listen, these are things we learn as we live. You got to put down those things because, frankly, the good that you get out of them is not long lasting, and there is a
Well,
better way.
and that's the thing. It's like because we're going to cover. Hopefully, we get to the article. We're going to talk about pornography later on. The writer of that article describes it as the law of diminishing returns. Like you said, you know, with the Doritos analogy or the White Castle analogy, but you could the same analogy goes for or comparison goes for pornography. Okay. In other words, yeah, first couple times or whatever, or when you first get involved in that lifestyle, that liberation, Catholic Church isn't going to tell me what to do, and it is a quick road, brother. It is a quick road down. Okay, when that law of diminishing returns kicks in with that lifestyle, you'll never. It's like if I've never thanked the Lord, not because I'm such a great person. I never did drugs in my life. I was told by a lot of guys growing up because of the way I am, because I have smoked cigarettes. I've been known to drink. Okay, that's kind of an understatement. All right, I do have a bit of an addictive personality. I was told by all my friends who did coke. In other words, growing up, said, Joe, don't ever do coke because you'll die. You'll die because coke is one of those things, again, diminishing returns. You do it, and that first high is something that's incomparable, and then you never get there again, and you just keep chasing and chasing and chasing. And it's the same thing. People need to realize that's what you got to try to do for people, is try to tell them, look, you could go down this road. You're going to find out the hard way. You're going to find out the hard way. It's not a road you want to go down. Okay. But understand you will. The problem, though, and what you said earlier reminded me of this. You know, Father Fidelis is in jail again, right?
I did not know that.
Right. And it reminded me of that because somebody posted it on Facebook over the weekend. Okay. Father Fidelis, for those of you who don't know, CFR, Franciscan Friar of the Renewal. He gets arrested for going into the abortion clinics with the red rose, same as Father Stephen Imperato, the protest priest. Anyway, what reminded me of him is what you said about the mentality. That's why the people that go up against the Father Fidelises of the world and can't stand him simply because he's praying, and people who are praying in front of an abortion clinic, because it's a reminder of what you said, Joe. They know they're violating the natural law. They know it. What they don't want is to be reminded of it. And Christians praying in front of an abortion clinic reminds them of the intrinsic evil that they support. And that's why I'm telling you, with the American left, look, we know how vicious they are. they're not going to say one word about these Christians that are going to die in Afghanistan. Not one. And the administration is going to go right along with it too. Unfortunately, I expect the next couple of weeks to be very bloody in Afghanistan, and it's going to be a lot of Christian blood that's going to be on that ground.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Joe Biden's disappearing act. David Marcus, that is, in the Federalist, touched on this week. Ultimately, that's how he became the president. I mean, Joe Biden, let's be honest, the press campaigned for Joe Biden. Joe Biden did not campaign. This is probably like the first president of the United States. He simply did not campaign. I mean, you would see the pictures. He'd have 8 people in circles standing, right. Like he just did not campaign. The press campaigned for him. But this is interesting. Clearly, like we said in the beginning of the show, it was both a strategic and a moral failure by the way that America exited Afghanistan and continues to basically exit Afghanistan. We watch it unfold constantly on the news. All you got to do is turn on the TV. But I think this gave people a very clear insight in, this is what I want to talk about, into Joe Biden. A couple things. He doesn't take questions. Right. I mean, Joe, he's the president. He'll talk and he marches off. And it's like, dude, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. And I actually think, I think it's very clear, one, that the job is above his head. Joe Biden, I can't speak. I mean, I didn't follow his career, but I mean, at 78 years old, Joe Biden is not a strong 78-year-old man. Like Bernie Sanders is 80. Bernie Sanders is infinitely more competent than Joe Biden, mentally speaking. He's an older man. He's sharp as a tack. I met 80-year-olds. They're sharp as a tack. He's not one of them. He cannot handle it. And this is very clear. And then he'll read things like, wait a minute, I got a list here of, they gave me who I'm supposed to call to
yeah.
I mean, gosh, it's bad enough they're giving you a list. You're not sharp enough to know that you shouldn't read that.
Well, he could joke all he wants about calling on Peter Doocy and stuff like that. The bottom line is Joe Biden's not taking any hardball questions. I mean, I would be, if I was a Democrat, I would be sitting here and I was saying to myself, this is a joke, isn't it? In other words, because they could say what they want, Joe Resinello. I'll tell you one guy who, if he was in this position, wouldn't be walking out of the press conference. And we know that from his term, is Donald Trump.
There's no doubt about it.
Donald Trump took incoming for 4 years. He didn't shy away from press conferences. He got right up there and right in their face. They didn't like it. But what would you rather have? A president that at least gets up there and fields some tough questions? Okay. We saw what he went through with COVID, with Scarf Lady and Fauci on either side of him. We saw what happened with him. Trump was right there every single day. Biden walks away. You're a Democrat. You're honestly going to say that you're proud of your vote, that you voted for this guy, and you're going to sit there and say you're proud of it. I am proud of my vote for Donald Trump. I am. I'll back it up too. I'll back it up with accomplishment, not because I agreed with everything he did, because we didn't. I'm with the King dude on that. I'm 51% Donald Trump. 51% for some very important things. Okay. Some things that were disappointing, but Trump was right in there taking questions from Jim Acosta and the rest of the scumbags in the press. This guy runs away, Joe.
Well, I don't think
runs away, Joe.
He's not capable. Away. He can't. You see, this is what I mean. I think it gave people a very clear insight into this particular administration. I mean, he's not capable of handling it. He can't handle it. I mean, at one point, this was like the image of the week. He has his hands in his face. I mean, you're like, oh my gosh, guy. Like,
Joe, hang on to that thought. Let's take a quick break. You're listening to the Crusade Channel. You're home for the Mike Church Show, Crusade Channel News, the Barrett Brief, and the Kennedy Profession. From sun up to sundown, the Crusade Channel is the last live radio station standing. Stick around. Welcome back, everyone, to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello, way in the breach on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Please become a Founders Pass member. Trust me when I tell you, you're going to love the entire lineup at the Crusade channel. Mike Church, Rick Barrett, Frontline with Joe and Joe. You have Kennedy Hall now that's on the Crusade channel. It is well worth the price of admission. So we encourage you to do that. Yeah, Joe, getting back to Biden, I mean, they could say, like I'm going to say it again, they could say what they want about Trump, but Trump stood right in there with a very hostile enemy of the American people press. This guy literally scurries away. Like he literally kind of like it's a show. He's a caricature of himself. He was always, in fairness, a caricature of himself. Joe Biden's been a moron from the time that I became politically conscious. Okay, going back to Clarence Thomas and all that. Joe Biden is a bona fide moron. What he's real good at is embezzling a lot of money out of foreign countries to enrich himself. That's what he's really good at. Okay, but it doesn't take a genius to do that. At the end of the day, politically speaking, he's a moron. He was never able to articulate himself well, even as a senator. Okay, ask Clarence Thomas about that. Okay, but it's like you said, but even more so now, especially since his handlers are basically telling him, absolutely not. You don't answer certain questions from certain people and you get off that stage. Pronto. And as a dutiful puppet, that's what he does.
Well, I don't think we've ever, as an American, as a country, America has ever seen anything like this before. I mean, there have been good presidents, there have been bad presidents, but we've always had a president. This guy, like I said, it's by his actions. Look at what just took place. First of all, he would hide. I mean, something like this happens. You get on the news that hour. You're the president. Nope. Days went by. I mean, I'll be honest with you. It should scare people, if you ask me, because I got news for you. It's part of the job. That's why it's a tough job to be the president. This is just the beginning. There's going to be other events. Here we have coming up in New Orleans. You know, we're on the Crusade channel. It's headquartered in Louisiana. You have Hurricane Ida. It's supposedly a Category 4 hurricane heading
towards. What's this guy going to do about it, Joe?
But this is my point.
What's this guy going to do about it?
This is like what I mean. Like things happen in the course of a presidency, in the 4 years, in the 8 years that you're in office. You have to know how to handle it. Not only make decisions and make good ones, but you have to field questions. It's part of the job. It's right. Like, it's just part of the job. And that's what I mean. This event, people have been saying this for some time. I mean, people, you know, the joke around the Beltway is who's running the country. People say Obama, people say this, people say that. But in all honesty, this gave people, I think, a very clear, like the kimono got open. And it's almost like this guy can't handle it. He can't handle it.
He can't. And the thing is, and the more we see even Democrats, then they're looking at the alternative. And if you want to talk about frightening, okay.
No, she can't carry it. I'll be honest with you. I know a lot of people, you know, at the beginning of this debacle, you know, said that, you know, she'll be the president. I'll be truthful with you. Joe Biden, I don't think they want, first of all, I don't think they wanted Biden. I think they had to settle for Biden. That's number one. I think he was the only person. He's the wrapping paper around the package. They have an agenda. This is an ideological administration. They're putting forth an agenda of which does not mesh with the majority of the American people, not just Republicans. Many Democrats don't see eye to eye with the ideas of this administration. I go by the people I talk to. I live in New Jersey. Keep this in mind. Some of my neighbors are Democrats. Yep. They are not on board. This is their ideas. Many of them are off the wall. They're off the wall. And this is, and to be honest with you, Harris cannot. First of all, she's not likable. She couldn't. She can't
She is
carry it.
so. Listen, is she? Let me tell you something. I'm getting so tired, Joe Rossinello. I'm getting so tired of hearing how the Democrats and people like Robbie Mook, right, and handlers like him, they're so smart. Did any of these smart people tell Kamala Harris, Kamala, don't laugh again like that. Don't do that. Half the country hates you, okay? And more than half the country is going to hate you even more if you laugh again like that. Stop doing that. It doesn't work. Hillary, it didn't work for Hillary, and somebody should have told Hillary that. Somebody ought to tell Kamala Harris that. Say, stop laughing when somebody challenges you. It really is a turnoff. You're never ever, not that we hope she never becomes president.
She never
like
will.
you're never, but the thing is that laugh that somebody's not stopping her from doing is, I think, pissing off a lot of people.
I think
She's
that was
like,
a
somebody
bad
asked her a legit
calculation.
question, Joe. Somebody asked her a legit question, and she starts, what do you, I'm about to ask you about Afghanistan. What are you laughing at, Kamala? What are you laughing at? Seriously.
She can't. I'll be honest with you. That was one of their. They made many mistakes. They've overplayed
Oof.
their hand, and that was a mistake. I think they would have been better served with Elizabeth Warren. Now, these are people, to be honest with you, I completely don't agree with. But I'm talking purely from chess pieces. I actually think they would have been better served with Pete Buttigieg than Kamala Harris. I think she is a disaster. And frankly, she cannot carry it. If Joe Biden was to step out of the picture, however he was to step out of the picture, whether they took him out, whatever, I'll be honest with you, disaster. I'll be truthful with you. It would be outside of straight. I don't think you could cheat enough to keep her.
To get her elected.
I don't think you could cheat enough.
Right.
I think the presidency.
The reason why they chose him is because they figured that they can make it plausible, that there be enough middle of the road people whose grandfathers told them don't ever vote Republican, that they said, okay, I'm going to go vote for, that they can make it even plausible. I'm not going to sit here and lie to the Crusade Channel audience. I don't believe any of it. I don't care what Nancy Pelosi. I don't care what Nadler says. I don't care about any of it. All right. We need election integrity. We need laws that are going to strengthen election integrity. All right. So that they don't get away with, if they did get away with anything, that they won't get away with it again. Okay. But we need voter ID laws. We need all of it. Okay. They're banking on Republicans doing nothing and caving to the pressure of being called a racist when it comes to voter integrity. That's the only way. And even then, they couldn't do enough stealing to get Kamala Harris.
No,
elected.
I don't. She can't carry it. She couldn't carry. I'll be truthful with you. I think that was a bad choice.
You think Bruno Brujad and John Fatanyats, okay, blue collar guys that work down at Port Newark, okay, you think those guys, okay, that vote Democrat, you think that they're going to vote for Kamala Harris? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No way. She is so smug. She's such a smug person. And people see that. Your average Democrat who, God willing, they open their eyes and get away from that party, okay? They're not going for her. No way.
Well, people won't be energized. You see, the problem with that, those type of people who are diehard Democrats, they may not show up. I mean, that's the problem. That party, if you ask me, and again, as long as they're for abortion and same-sex marriage, as a Catholic, I can't vote for them. I simply can't because it's a priority for Catholics, those two issues. But with that said, not everyone thinks that way. They need to get back into reality. Again, Hillary Clinton, who I never would vote for. The Clintons, if you ask me, represent some of the worst aspects that politicians have basically exhibited in America. Bill Clinton was completely, if you ask me, a corrupt man. From the way he handled himself personally. I mean, to basically the slush fund that he called his what the hell is it? The Clinton Foundation. I mean, that was money. I don't even want to know what money was going through that thing, enriching himself and their family. That's a story for another day. But the Clintons had it dialed in. as far as Democrats go before Bernie Sanders ruined it. The party has to return. Now, again, am I going to vote for them? No. But with that said, Republicans, and you've said this time and time again, have to get away from this country club idea. They have to be a little bit more for the working man.
They got to be more like Trump, Joe. They got to
Oh,
be
there's
more
no
like
doubt.
Trump.
Trump
With some
rebrand,
tweaks,
no
with some
doubt.
tweaks. Okay, I'm not because better get it straight. The whole rainbow agenda, that's got to go. People are not going for that. I don't care what CNN says. I don't believe their stupid polls. People are against gay marriage in this country. They're against 18-year-old boys going into girls' rooms. They absolutely are. Okay, and they're tired of being bullied. So the Republicans need to get that through their head. No kowtowing to the rainbow crowd. No kowtowing to the feminists. Okay, abortion is becoming a winning issue for us because people can actually use their eyes and see. I do want to mention something on a more positive note, though, Joe, here at the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. You guys out there, you might remember that a couple of months ago, maybe 3 months ago, we had asked you for some prayers for a friend of ours, David Cox, whose daughter was going through suffering from cancer. Okay. And we thank you for your prayers. David reached out to us. He let us know Sandra, his daughter, is no longer in chemo and currently is cancer free. Praise Jesus Christ. Okay,
That's
because
wonderful.
it's a wonderful, wonderful news. Okay, and it shows that with when you with humility ask the good Lord for something. Okay, He does it. He does it. God bless you all. That Sandra's doing okay, and continue to keep her in your prayers for a even fuller recovery, that her cancer never comes back. So yeah, Joe. I mean, but we're bad people because we pray for one another when people are suffering. We deserve to get our heads chopped off by the Taliban, according to the Dan Savages of the world and the homosexual mafia in America. In other words,
Well,
and
let's
then
talk.
they go ahead, go ahead.
No, but since we're talking about elections, I think we should segue into this story by Lucas Nolan. I found this to be, I wasn't shocked, but frankly, it's disturbing. Joe
Mm-hmm.
brought this to my attention. There's a recent report, it's in the New York Times, that claims that Facebook has been contacting academics in an effort to create a group to advise on election-related decisions. It's expected that the Masters of the Universe will announce their election commission in advance of 2022 midterm elections.
Now,
What does Facebook have with regard to elections? I mean, like, this is just insane.
Joe, I said to you before, okay, I'm going to bring up Bruno and John Fartagnac again. Why can't, if Facebook can create an election commission and we have to actually listen to this, then how come you, me, Bruno Bourgeat, and John Fartagnac, why don't we start an election commission? And we want to tell the government, we need this information. We're going to sue you if you don't give it. We got FOIA requests. We got all of it. What qualifies Mark Zuckerberg? Mark Zuckerberg is not more qualified than you and me to comment on American political and cultural scene. He's not. He runs Facebook.
The thing that makes him qualified is 25% of the globe is on his platform. I mean, right. That's what it is. I mean, this is a very dangerous situation. Yeah. I mean, there was a professor at Stanford University, Nathaniel Persley, and he basically said they say that he's already using his platform to influence elections in other countries. Now, obviously, they have a slant that leans to the left, and right. We've already seen that in 2018, they created an oversight board. It's supposed to be an open platform, which primarily, gave advantage to left-wing, politicians, left-wing media, political experts. And we've seen that they have basically censored. We saw what they did to Donald Trump, but also to other people who have different opinions. To be honest with you, they shadow ban us. We have 3,300 followers on Facebook. When we come on Sunday nights, they don't get notified automatically. They have to know to come on our show. And we're small potatoes compared to other people. I mean, this is a dangerous idea. They're influencing elections, period. End of story. And it goes against, I'll be truthful with you. One of the first things that the next Republican president has to do, as well as when we have the House and the Senate, they got to break Facebook up. They have to break them up. They have to go. This is out of control. If you know, some Democrats, if you're an objective Democrat, you should see this. This is not an American idea. Who are they, Joe? Who are they? Know who they are? They control 25% of the communications in the world. That's who they are, and that's why they're doing it.
Right, right. And that's the problem. That's what it's always the problem. You know, and all the good people out there at the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, know what I'm going to say. Republicans do nothing. When I think of how much they make me sick, you know what? I was feeling mischievous the other day, Joe Resinello. So I was watching the Kavanaugh hearing, okay, like on YouTube. I was just flipping around, okay.
Oh, that was.
I stumbled upon a video with disgraziad Senator Jeff Flake sitting there with this pained look on his face, and we'll let the FBI, we'll let them look into the allegations. If I was a United States Senator and I have a constituency, believe me, Joe, if I ever got elected United States Senator, I would have a safe seat, because anybody who's going to elect me, all right, is going to know exactly what I stand for. I would have called Christy Blasey Ford a scumbag liar. I would have said, I'm not giving you the time of day. In fact, after we prove you're a liar, I'm going to have you arrested for doing what you're doing, for getting up here and wasting the Senate's time. But then you got to hear Jeff Flake, we'll, you know, and the woman in the elevator, you know, like, how could you do this? And he's sitting there.
That was her niece. That was his niece. Right?
That was his niece. She got paid well for that acting job. So, but this is what you're dealing with Republicans. Thank God that Flake is gone. But if you don't have some people out there that are going to primary some of these Republicans, okay, and move them out where they need to be moved out, and get more Rand Pauls, get more Ted Cruz's, get more Josh Hawleys and people like that, Facebook's never getting broken up, ever. Facebook needs to do one of two things, along with YouTube and the rest of them. You're either an open platform or you're not. And if you're not an open platform, you don't have any more protection. So you make your choice. You're going to go one of two ways. You can't have it both ways. If you're going to editorialize, you do not have Section 230 protection. That means you could get sued. So you pick your poison, go to your board of directors, but that's the choice you have. And then I dare say that they'll become an open platform. They'll go back and say, because why is it that, of course, Facebook should be used for elections? It's social media. Facebook shouldn't be playing referee in those, you know, with those political ads. If Bernie Sanders wants to put up his communist propaganda and he's running for president, let him. And if Donald Trump wants to, let him. If I'm going to run for Congress in New Jersey, okay, I get to put it on Facebook. No, you don't get to fact check me, Mr. Zuckerberg. Who are you to fact check me? You don't fact check all the liars on your side of the aisle. And you want to fact check me? And it's disgusting that we see it now. We see you can't mention certain words on Facebook at all. Don't say anything about vaccines. Don't mention elections. Don't do anything like that. Don't talk about little kids in masks in school. You'll get taken down, shut down. Who are you to fact check me? You know who's supposed to fact check me, Joe Resinello? The people listening. That's what a free marketplace of ideas is.
That's very true.
Not Mark Zuckerberg.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's dangerous. It's not an American idea. They got to go. Facebook is turned into a poison. I'm actually trying to wean myself off of it a little bit. I'm going to try to make it like where I look at it in the morning and then that's it. It's like it's gotten to be a poison. It's poisoning the country in so many respects. And frankly, like when you read a story like this, this is a dangerous situation and they've got to go. I cannot wait until the next Republican president, when they control the House and the Senate. I mean, the House and the Senate, rather. They should break them up so fast you can't even blink. That would be the first thing I did, actually. First thing I did if I was the Speaker of the House.
Newt Gingrich one time said, if you elect me president, in between the inaugural address and the congressional luncheon, I'm going to do this, and this. Oh, no, he said at the time, he said, I'm going to fire the heads of all the federal agencies on my way from the inaugural to the congressional luncheon, because he was saying I have the power to do that as president. I wish the next one says, in between the inauguration and the congressional luncheon on the day that I'm sworn in, I'm stripping Google and Facebook and Twitter and the rest of them of all Section 230 protection. Period. Exclamation point, as Father Karapi used to say. Period. Exclamation point. And that's it. Joe, let's take a quick break. You're listening to the Crusade Channel, your home for the Mike Church Show, Crusade Channel News, the Barrett Brief, Kennedy Profession from sun up to sundown. The Crusade Channel is the last live radio station standing. Welcome back, everyone, to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Rossinello, way in the breach on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. But yeah, Joe, that's what I would do. Section 230 protection, gone. Gone, first thing. Put them on notice on day one. Just like the Washington Post, the day that Donald Trump got inaugurated, they started planning for impeachment. On day one, the Republican needs to say, Zuckerberg, Mutant, Dorsey, and all of you, you're all in trouble now. All right. And not because it's not going to be the heavy hand of government. It's very simple. The government's, like I said, I think it's very reasonable to just say to them, here's your choice. You're an open platform and we leave you alone, or you editorialize and you have bias and you pick and choose, in which case you lose Section 230 protection. It's a very simple choice. We leave it to you, and that's it. You have 30 days. And if you don't comply within 30 days, if you don't give us a decision within 30 days, we'll make the decision for you. And that's the way it should work.
Well, let's talk a little bit about first things. Carl Trueman, he wrote an interesting article basically entitled, "What Would It Mean to Overturn Roe?" Now, specifically speaking, he's talking about the Dobbs versus Mississippi case, which is in the Supreme Court. Using Dobbs to overturn Roe, this is, I'm just going to opine a little bit on what Truman had to say. Using Dobbs to overturn Roe will move our society slightly closer to a more accurate understanding of what it means to be human. Interesting. Abortion is couched in the language of choice and liberty, something that strikes an obvious and cynical rhetorical chord with the American soul, but in reality, it reflects a profoundly defective anthropology, according to which every individual is sovereign and everyone else will encounter, even our own children, are to be considered first and foremost a threat to that sovereignty.
Amen.
Speaking with regard to this, I mean, there's a couple things that could happen. If the Supreme Court does, first of all, I'm shocked they even took it. I am. What is it, 16 weeks? I think that's the threshold they're holding out in this.
I guess.
I believe it is. If they go, if I'm wrong, please correct me, people in the chat room. I believe it's 16 weeks. If they say they rule in favor of Mississippi in this particular case, there's a downside to this, believe it or not. The upside is children. It sets a precedent, and it could basically be used in other states. That's a good thing. But I'll be honest with you, Joe, if this does rule in favor of the pro-life side of the house, it puts the abortion debate to bed. In America, this will put, not amongst Catholics, but amongst politicians. I'm telling you right now, if you are a strategic politician, to be honest with you, you would want this to go in favor of Mississippi. It takes the edge off of the debate because the Democrats have pushed it too far. No one's for third trimester abortion. No one, not even Democrats are. It's like overwhelmingly so. 80s, high 80s. No one, only crazy people are for that. If this is to pass, I'm telling you right now, from a political perspective, the pro-life, this debate, it's finished. It's finished.
But I'm not following you. In what way are you saying?
Because to be honest with you, it's palatable to say it's just a glob of cells. It's palatable. Like years ago, and many people, it's like in Europe, you could have an abortion within the first trimester. People, it's a more palatable idea because they're not going to put down casual sex. They're simply not. The only way that happens is God himself basically puts his hand on the button and
Right.
changes the direction. Outside of that, Republican or Democrat, people are not putting down that activity. The horse is out of the barn.
So you're saying that it would behoove the pro-abortion people to want Roe versus Wade overturned, because at the very least, in most states, abortion is still going to be legal.
Correct.
And there's not going to be, and they'll say we don't have to argue about it anymore. No, it's
From a
not going to be.
political perspective, like
No,
maybe
I
not
know
the, like from a political perspective, not the hardcore like feminist, like, you know, I want, it's my body, not that crowd. But if
Right.
you are a Democrat and you're thinking clearly,
Right.
the Cuomo route that reproductive act that they passed, that's not a winner. That's a loser. This is a winner, because then you could sell this a little bit more to, frankly, a population that is pro casual sex. And we are, as an American population. People, listen, Joe, that's Republicans and Democrats. We're not. So this is, granted, on the positive side, it is going to limit abortions. Now that's a good thing. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. That's a very, very good thing. But I'll tell you this: if this goes in favor of Mississippi, I'm telling you right now, the dial politically will never move past this, in my view, unless God himself puts his hand on the button. No way.
Look, I've said,
I could be wrong. It's my opinion, though. I'm just
and by the way,
expressing
just
it.
to put a finer point on the right and their desire for casual sex. Okay, remember, and we've said this before on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online. We've said this before. Remember something: if you want to see Americanism on full display, okay, Ted Cruz, who we like, let's be clear, we like Ted Cruz. He's not always right. When he reached out to Ocasio-Cortez to try to expand contraception, that shows you where the American mind is at and the American conservative mind is at. Because even a smart guy like Ted Cruz doesn't understand the root of our problems is the contraceptive mentality. Is contraception, not abortion. It's contraception and the perverted view of sex. And what I mean by perverted, you know what I mean. In other words, outside of marriage, emptying the sexual act of its true meaning. Okay. But we see where the Ted Cruzes of the world are. That's where the Sean Hannitys of the world are. That's where unfortunately, I think the Glenn Becks of the world are. In other words, the American right wants their casual sex as much as the left does. The difference is, the difference is the American right claims to be pro-life. My fear is that Roe versus Wade gets overturned. The majority of the states are going to have abortion legal up at least to some point, even if it's the first trimester. Abortion will be legal in 90% of the states. Okay. Even pro-life states are not going to ban it completely. Let's call it the way it is, Joe. Okay. And the argument will go to bed. And Planned Parenthood will still get $500 million a year from the federal government.
No question. I mean, Ted Cruz also, maybe he doesn't understand, like you said, the root cause of the issue, but maybe he does. Because, again, people have self-serving interests. And I'm not saying that this is what he's doing, but don't think that these guys don't know that people aren't not dude, Catholics contracept at a rate that's overwhelming. How is it? Let's just be honest. You don't have to be a brain surgeon. You get somebody who got married at 24 years old. I know tons of people that got married in their mid-20s. They have 2 kids. That's impossible. I'm just telling you this right now. I'm just like I am married 8 years in September. I'm not waving the Joe Resinello flag, but I'm just telling you, we're open to life. We're expecting our 5th child in 8 years, and we lost 2. I'm just saying, if you got married at 24 years old and you had 2 kids, now listen, stuff happens medically speaking. People have a number of miscarriages. We had 2. People have issues where they can't conceive. I get it. It happens. But Most people don't have that issue. There are those issues, they're real, but how many people did you grow up with? How many people did you go to college with who are Catholic, who have 2 kids or 1 kid? They got married in their early to mid 20s. How is they're contracepting?
Right.
I mean, and you're not, here's the thing. And this is where, if you ask me, there's a lack of formation, but you're not living a sacramental marriage. You're not getting the grace. That's why the divorce rate is what it is, because marriage is hard. You
Joe,
see,
I've said it so many times, and I do like to let our audience know at the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. I do like, and I like when you personalize things too, because we're trying to convey to people, we get it, man. What do you think? We grew up in in the woods somewhere. Okay, we get the reality of the situation. You want to know the reality of the situation? Okay, that me and my wife, I was thinking about this the other day. My wife and I, all right, our marriage is as strong could be. And it dawned on me. I mean, I think about it a lot, but most recently, it was going through my head. I said, it's only because of Christ.
of
It is
course,
only because of Christ. There
Joe,
are
that's a
so
given.
many obstacles in this world. There are so many things that could come in between a husband and a wife. If you don't have Jesus in the center, okay, you're doomed. Because me and my wife are not exceptional people. We are not exceptional
You
people.
don't
But
have
what
to
we
be.
are is faithful and asking the Lord that when we stumble upon these issues and roadblocks and obstacles, please help us overcome them. And He does. Okay. Without the Lord, Joe, I'm telling you, our marriage would be toast.
There's a good book out there. I read it. Fulton Sheen. It said there are 3. I'm paraphrasing. I have it on my bookshelf somewhere. It says it takes 3 to marry. Basically, I'm paraphrasing the title of the book by Fulton Sheen. And what he says in that book, one of the themes of it is basically in marriage, you're not looking at each other. You see, people think that in marriage, you're gazing at one another. No, successful marriages gaze in the same direction, and that
Yes.
direction is God.
Right.
You see, that's even excluding the grace that you get from a sacramental marriage.
Right.
Ultimately, even outside of marriage, life does not make sense without God. I'm sorry, all you atheists out there. I'm sorry, all you secular humanists out there. You might be rich. You may outbuy and sell me. We were made by God to live for God and to be with God for all eternity. When you take Him out of the equation, life doesn't make sense, particularly when it comes to suffering, because suffering is part of everyone's life. God gives meaning to suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Also, death. Without God, you have no hope because you know the end of the game. You die. You have no
Yeah, Len.
hope.
If you needed to see an example of that, just look at the fear that has set in the last year and a half because of COVID. You cannot be that afraid of a bug, okay, if you have hope. The reason why so many people are so fearful, they have no hope. Sorry how
Without hope,
judgmental
there's
that sounds.
despair. I mean,
Well, Joe, listen. When you live a life where you just say to yourself, you bought into the atheist lie that's all about just pleasure. That's the highest good. It's about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Knock yourself out, okay? Because when you go in the ground, you're dead. When you're confronted with COVID, what the hell do you think the reaction is going to be? Oh my God, I'm 28 years old. I have a whole life of sex and drugs and rock and roll to lead. I can't die now. I can't die now. It can't be over now. I'd like to tell them it's not over. If you don't repent, you're going to go to hell, and that lasts for eternity. But that's the world we live in. That's the world we live in. They promote hopelessness. The culture promotes hopelessness, so that what you end up with, okay, is what we've seen over the last year and a half. Joe, I'm getting over COVID. I figure I'm probably over it by now. Okay. Um, but I've been on quarantine for the last 10 days. I couldn't go to work. I didn't fear death. I went to confession. Okay. I prayed that I got through it and the Lord brought me through it. Okay. But if I died, I have hope. I don't want to die. I have a wife. I'm fostering a child. I want to bring this kid up. I want to form him. I want to help him into adulthood and manhood. Okay. I have things I want to do with my life. If the good Lord took me, He took me. I have no fear of death. I have a fear of hell. I will repent. Okay. In other words, but I don't fear death. In other words, the way this culture does. Why? Because we're Catholic. What does that mean? We have hope. The
Absolutely.
theological virtue of hope.
But getting back to what you said about marriage, life doesn't work without God. I'm telling you, it doesn't. But also marriage. I've said this on the show, and I'm going to say it again. I don't even believe in civil marriage. First of all, God doesn't acknowledge civil marriage. Let me first say that. God does not acknowledge civil marriage. You're married when you're married in the name of the Lord, as in the church. Also, there are Protestant churches, and the Catholic Church recognizes two sacraments in the Protestant churches. They're baptism and marriage. Two sacraments are recognized by the Catholic Church outside of the Catholic Church. But there are 7 sacraments in the Catholic Church, and marriage is a vocation. And I'm telling you this right now. Many people who are in the chat room right now have been married a lot longer than I have. Marriage is challenging, and each of us are flawed. Everyone is flawed. And I'm going to tell you this right now. If you don't have God in your marriage, I got news for you. If you make it, you're not going to make it happy. It's going to be people like, listen, it's not just about making it. It's the quality of your marriage. Listen, marriage is hard. Right now, I got 4 kids under 7 years old, and my 81-year-old mother's living at my house. That's not, and my wife is 8 months pregnant, and we both work because we have to pay bills and send our kids to college. And I'm going to tell you this right now. That's hard. You're not good. You think you're going to do that without God? Good luck.
Knock yourself
Good
out.
luck.
I want to move on, Joe Rossinello at the front line with Joe and Joe, but I did want to read this from Carl Trueman because I thought I think it's a statement that's worth maybe a few minutes of our time to comment on. So if you'll indulge me, okay, I just want to. He's talking about obviously repealing Roe versus Wade, overturning Roe versus Wade. He said repealing such law would not only protect the innocent, but also affirm the truth about humanity and remind us of our innate obligations to others. The Supreme Court should overturn Roe and Casey in Dobbs. This would be a strike against Anthony Kennedy's bizarre definition of personhood in Casey and push society toward a proper concept of what it means to be an adult human person. Now, this is where I want your comments, Joe. One who understands obligations towards dependents. Republican appointed justices who do not understand that are no friends to conservatism or to humanity. I think that's kind of has to be our position. Is this country that forget about the whole political aspect of let's just agree on abortion up in the first trimester? No. You have an obligation to the defenseless, okay? And Republicans and conservatives have been waiting for an opportunity for conservatives to finally be in a position to do something about it. And if they show themselves not to be friends of the unborn, okay, then I don't know where we're at, Joe.
Well, I'll tell you what, think about what the Supreme Court did with regard to slavery. I mean, you don't have to be a legal scholar to know that it's wrong. I mean, it was debated from the very beginning, and there were people at the founding that had issues with slavery, but they went along. Why? Because there's pressure. I mean, Joe, to be your own man in a position of power, to be your own man when you're not in a position of power in this world is hard. It's hard. You're going to have enemies, and people aren't going to like you. At best, there will be people who don't like you.
Right.
However, when you're in a position of power where you actually could affect millions of lives, and to be your own man and to follow your own voice, and if that voice is following the voice of God, dude, that's hard. I'll be honest with you. I mean, this is the type of thing. I got news for you. If the court does go along with Mississippi, there will be death threats. This is serious stuff. This is not like, oh, okay, we're gonna hear a case on, a traffic ticket.
Or even a Second Amendment case, which things get heated over that too. The reaction to Roe versus Wade getting overturned is going to make any reaction to, let's say, the Heller decision 15 years ago look like a walk in the park. They're going to be rioting. And like you said, I hope Kavanaugh. First of all, we don't know if we're going to get this, if we're going to get let down by Hare Roberts and Kavanaugh and Gorsuch and Barrett. We don't know yet. Okay. If anything, I would think in my mind Barrett might be leaning towards overturning Roe versus Wade. But quite frankly, I don't know about Roberts. I don't know about Kavanaugh, and I don't know about Gorsuch. Establishment guys, particularly Kavanaugh and Roberts. So the thing is, but on this is, at the end of the day, and this is the question I would ask at the front line with Joe and Joe. If we allow one baby to be killed in the womb, what does that say about us as a nation? One child to be killed in the womb for any reason, under any circumstance. What did that baby ever do? And how could you possibly justify killing that baby?
Well, I'll
And that's
tell you
where
what
we're
he
at now.
did. It got in your way. It got, you see, it's not about the kid. It's about, you see, that argument is gone because science makes it very clear. Very clear. You could get a 3D sonogram. It's like a movie, dude. You could see like the kid so clearly, it's almost scary. The point is, it's no longer a glob of cells. They can't say that anymore. I'll tell you what the kid did. It got in your way. I mean, that's it. It got in your way.
So does it ever strike you? I'm sorry, Joe, but does it ever strike here? You know what? Let's take this conversation. We have a couple minutes before the break on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. Let's take this conversation to a different level. What about how those who swear that they're so sophisticated, they swear that they're so civilized, okay? And they consider themselves, I'm pro-choice on abortion. You just reminded me of something. They're no different than the pagan Romans. No, pagan Romans and also other pagans, ancient pagans, they used to sacrifice their children to Moloch. Okay, they would take like their firstborn son or daughter and take their child to Moloch. And I won't describe it for the audience because it's disgusting. It's disturbing. Okay, how that sacrifice took place. Okay, they would sacrifice their children to themselves, but yet we constantly hear this refrain from modernists. All right, in the modern mind, oh, we're not like those ancient pagans. You're just effing like them. You're no different. They killed their babies and you kill yours for the same reason that Joe Resinello said. The kid's in your way. The kid's in your way and the kid's got to go. You're no different than a gangster. You want to judge gangsters? Gangsters kill people who get involved in that life, generally speaking. Seriously, I'm not justifying gangsters who kill people. But you understand, most of the people that get killed in the underworld are people that are criminals to begin with. Okay, you're worse than a gang. You're better than John Gotti, let's say, or Fat Tony Salerno. You're better than them because you kill babies and then you judge other people. You kill babies and then you judge pagans for, let's say, their rituals. You do the same exact thing.
Well, again, the human mind is an incredible thing, how it could rationalize bad behavior. I mean, people lie to themselves. Frankly, people live lies their whole life. That's, to be honest with you, why I think particularly on the abortion issue, some people are so animated because basically they're basically acting out, like I think many of those women that you see at these, like protests, most probably have had an abortion. And
Sure.
they're basically, to be honest with you, burying the idea by acting out. It's very hard. And I know a couple of women, particularly in some of the circles, Catholic circles that I've traveled in, that have had abortions. I know one that had two. To admit that and to go to dude, that's hard.
Joe, hold
That's
that thought.
not like you said a little white lie and go to confession.
No, I know. I agree. Let's take a quick break, Joe. We're going to come right back. You're listening to the Crusade Channel, your home for the Mike Church Show, Crusade Channel News, the Barrett Brief, and Kennedy Profession. From sun up to sundown, the Crusade Channel is the last live radio station standing. Welcome back, everyone, to the front line with Joe and Joe. Excuse me. Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello in the breach on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. So, yeah, Joe, to put a finer point on it, I don't know. First, when it comes to abortion, obviously, we're praying, you and I, and we've said this before on the Crusade channel, we're praying for a Guadalupe moment. That's what I'm praying for. More so than Fatima. Let's say I specifically say Guadalupe because the country of Mexico, the indigenous people of Mexico converted to the Catholic Church within 10 years of our mother appearing to Juan Diego, and their big thing was human sacrifice, and that's what we have in America right now, alongside of other intrinsic evils. We have human sacrifice. And yeah, you might be able to save some babies if Roe versus Wade is overturned, or this state bans it, or this state says only in the first trimester. You probably will save some lives. But in order for us to have our eyes open, I'm praying the good Lord sends his mama again to convert us, Joe Resinello.
Absolutely. I mean, I've always said this. I don't think America has the political will to overturn abortion completely. I seriously don't. I don't, like, even Republicans. It's not going to happen. If you're counting on the courts to do that, I'll be honest with you, I think you'll be disappointed. Even with this, like I said, even if they go with Mississippi, I'll be honest with you, your pro-life message, abolitionist pro-life message, actually is dead. It's dead.
Right.
It's going to dull the argument considerably, because there's a lot of people, you have, if you break down the scale of like 10% on one side of the aisle who are radical feminists who are for abortion up until the second that the child is born. And then you have radical, abolitionists who are for, basically life no matter what. In that middle, a lot of people, this isn't like a make or break issue. And if you basically say, yeah, within the first trimester, you can have an abortion. After that, you can't. Most people will say, I could live with that.
I know people who consider themselves pro-life, who are in favor of abortion in the first trimester. Like they say, I'm pro-life. So I'm pro-life, meaning, well, if you're going to have an abortion, get it done in the first trimester. A lot of it is just, and the reason why I bring that up, Joe Resinello, a lot of it is just misinformation. People are just, well, first of all, people are lied to, and a lot of the
people lie to themselves. Yeah.
Well, that too. But I'm saying that these are people who I consider to be good people. I think they're misguided. I think with a little bit of truth, they could be persuaded that no, abortion should be banned completely. But like I said, the reason why there's all this fog and confusion is because the devil has done a masterful job over the last 50, 60 years. And that's why I'm praying that our mother, Our Lady, shines, it comes to America, all right, and the Lord sends her, because that's the only way abortion is actually going to get just people. It's like seeing the face of God, Joe. In other words, why can't you sin in heaven? Because you've seen the face of God. You can't conceive of sin once you've looked at the face of God. It's impossible for you to sin when you're in heaven because you've seen God's face, the thought beyond which, the sight of which you can't, there is nothing greater than God's face. It's the same thing. If Our Lady was to come, all right, and help this nation, particularly our nation, because like I said, we're one of the worst in the world, okay? If Our Lady was to come, that people would get it through their head. They wouldn't even think that abortion is something that should be legal. They wouldn't even think it. That's what we need. I think that's a worthwhile prayer, Joe.
Oh, God could do anything.
It's a worthwhile prayer.
God could do anything. Like, never discount that. That's another thing. With God, all things are possible. But I will say this: the horse is out of the barn when it comes to the sexual revolution. To get that back in the barn, it may take something to that degree. I don't think, politically speaking, you think that America went berserk because of Donald Trump? Ban abortion, dude. You will see people go ape crap in a way that we have never seen before, ever.
Right.
Like It's just because, and they'll say it's this, it's that, it's this. I have casual sex and I'm not stopping it. And abortion is my way out. And there is no way that you're going to take that lifestyle away from me, because I have no even like thought of changing. And that's the truth. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the straight up and down truth. That's what has to change. And here's another thing. The reason why people don't see this, and this is something we did talk about with E. Michael Jones, it's because sin dulls the intellect. He said
Right.
that, and it's the
Aquinas. Well,
truth.
he was
It's the
he
truth.
was referring to Aquinas. Yeah.
And it's straight up and down. It's not like you don't have to be a genius to basically see this, but what you have to do is get the scales from your eyes. St. Paul was blind, literally, but in a sense, he was also blind figuratively. Much of America is blind. Why? I'm going to tell you right now. They don't go to confession. Even Catholics don't go to confession anymore. I mean, I went to a parish. He would have 2 like nights of confession, general. Like you would go with individually to a priest, but he would have like all priests come. It's kind of like a trendy thing to do in some parishes. But on the weekend, they would have it on the schedule, like Saturday confessions. There were times I would go there. No priest would show up. The reason why the priest isn't showing up is because nobody's showing up.
Right.
And you're, to be honest with you, if you're not going to confession, you're not growing in virtue. And if you're not growing in virtue, you're not directing your life to heaven. And if you're not living your life in a state of grace, now granted, you may not be in mortal sin, but you're not getting because even venial sin dulls the effects of grace. You're not completely open to God.
Venal sin lowers your defenses.
There
That's
you
the
go.
problem. All right. And if you're like a good priest, I went to confession over the weekend. And he said to me, he goes, it was a particular sin. He goes, do you do it often? I said, no, my defenses were down. Honestly, I said, my defenses were down. He says, you praying? Yeah, praying. But the thing is, but I let my defenses down. But he offered a really good solution. It's something that you say all the time. He says, here's what I want you to do. This week, pick a day. I want you to give something up that you like. Offer it up in reparation for your sins. He goes, and try to start making that a practice every week. He goes, are you fasting? I said, not as effectively as I should. I'm not going to be honest with you. I abstain from meat on Wednesdays and Fridays, but I'm not really fasting the way I should. He goes, I recommend you do that. He goes, that's what will help you to keep your defenses up. I'm paraphrasing him, but that's what it is. Offer a fast, give something up, make a habit out of giving that thing up. Okay. And offer it up for salvation of souls, for salvation of your own soul, remission of your own sins. Okay. And I thought it was good. I'm relaying the story because I think that's a good practice. We all need to start giving some things up. You know what that'll do, Joe? On a practical level, too, it'll reduce selfishness.
It builds discipline. Sacrifice, fasting builds discipline, but it also, to be honest with you, makes your prayer much more efficacious. And frankly, it helps you to grow in holiness. The idea is to become holy. I got news for you. Catholics, we all are Catholic. Well, not all of us, but a lot of us in the chat room are Catholic. The idea to be Catholic, obviously, is to go to heaven, but also to be a light. The holier you are, the greater your influence will be, not on social media with regard to likes. I'm talking about your influence in your family, in your community. That's God working through you. That has nothing to do with you. Saints were simply people that emptied themselves of themselves, and God acted through them. I got news for you. If you want to do something that's impactful on this earth, that's lasting on this earth, strive to become a saint. I mean, this past week we had the feast day of Saint Augustine. I read the Magnificat every morning, and I was talking to my wife about it after I read a blurb on Saint Augustine. The man died in 430 AD. people are still talking about him. Tell me one secular institution that is still talked about from the 5th century. One. Can you do it? I can't.
Right. And I would say well, obviously when you're talking about history, people would say, well, they talk about Roman emperors and things like that. But I think the way I would phrase it is looking to somebody who lived 1600 years ago, who still has something to say that we can learn something from. You know what I'm trying to say?
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
the philosophy of an Augustine is timeless, because he's preaching he's teaching the truth, and the truth is obviously timeless, transcends time and space. So in that way, I would say absolutely. You know, when Martin Luther King was sitting in a jail in Birmingham, what was he doing? Twiddling his thumbs? He was quoting Augustine. He was quoting Augustine,
But
because
people
these are
miss
unjust
that.
laws.
People miss that. Like, if you really want to leave a mark on this earth, I'm telling you this, and everybody does, whether they say it or not, you know, it's through God. Holiness. Saints leave an indelible mark. And anything, even people who go through like the whole like NGO route, there's many people who do great things through those but it dies with you. When you do something through God, I'm telling you this right now, read a book on the saints. Saints change the world. And
Mhm.
here's the thing, when you talk to kids, particularly in good high schools around the country, Joe and I went to high schools, Catholic high schools. You know, I had a lot of friends that did some very significant things from a worldly perspective, very, very successful people. But ultimately, that success when they die ends. Granted, you give your money to your kids. I got news for you. If you didn't form your kids, they'll piss it away. I'm telling you that right the heck now. If you don't form your kids, you can give them $1 billion. They'll piss it away. They'll piss it away so fast, it would be like you might as well burn the money.
You give an unformed kid that kind of money,
Oh,
it's
it's
like
like
handing
giving
them
them a gun.
a loaded gun.
And I'm going to be truthful with you. But if you live a holy life in union with God and his church, God will use you to do things that will blow your mind. I'm telling you this right now. I don't know why people don't grasp that. Everyone wants to do something great. You go to a high school, you talk to 15-year-olds. If you gave a talk and you said, do you want to do something great in life? Everybody's hands raised. Everybody, whatever you want to do, whether they want to be a baseball player, whether they want to be a doctor, whether they want to be a lawyer, all that is limited. If you want to do something, that's what drove St. Ignatius Loyola into becoming the great saint that he was. That's what drove Francis. That's what they figured that out. I'm telling you this right now, anyone who hears my voice. And to do that takes work on your part. Like Joe said, you got to fast, you got to pray, because you can't do that on your own. But I got news for you. All those things are possible because God said so, because Jesus rose from the dead and saints did it. People, regular people, I say this in a lot of times when I put stuff out in social media, 12 common men changed the world. They
Right.
changed the world. 12 normal, uneducated men. Why can't you do that?
That's
Why?
right.
In
Right.
all honesty, why not?
And
Who
it goes
are,
back to our first conversation. It goes back to our first conversation. And they didn't change the world by unsheathing a sword. They changed the world by speaking the truth and living the truth. Remember what Lenin said? He said, if I had a dozen men like Francis of Assisi, I would have changed the world. They know the truth. Even an atheist scumbag like Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. Okay. In other words, they knew the truth. They saw the greatness. He saw the greatness of a Francis of Assisi. In other words, why do people still even talk about Christianity? In other words, Christianity should have been a movement that came and went under assault by the Roman Empire, Nero and the rest of them, the rest of that horrid crew, Diocletian, all of them. In other words, Christianity should have never gotten off the ground. I said that to an atheist one time. So why are you Catholic? I said, because the Catholic Church shouldn't be here. If you wanted to go by purely materialistic, naturalistic explanations, the Catholic Church should not exist. I said they were all killed. All the founders of the church were killed, starting with Christ. Why is it still here? Because it's the truth.
One of the things that have driven me to believe in, because I've seen it with my own eyes. I have seen the miracles of the church in front of my own eyes. I'll give you an example. I can remember I visited a leper colony in Italy, in India, and I read Mother Teresa founded this on the outskirts of Calcutta, and basically these were people who were pushed out of the city and they were dying on a railroad track, literally. So she goes there with 2 nuns under a tree and starts giving aid. Well, the colony that I went to visit now is thriving. It's got like farmland. It's got housing. They make all the saris for the nuns, the lepers around the whole world. They have looms. They gave them dignity. And when I was there, the first time I went there twice, I went there and I said to myself, now I have an MBA. I work in corporate America. I know how businesses work. I know how money is raised. I know how organizations work. I get it. I do. I said to myself, how did this happen? How did this happen? It doesn't make any sense. It's completely an impoverished country. People, no one cares about these people. Yet look in front of your face, Joe. How did this happen? God. You see, this is what people like Dominic, like Francis, like Mother Teresa, they understood that. There's a great movie for anybody who's in the chat room. It's about St. Dominic. It was made by the I believe it was made in the Philippines, the Dominican Philippines, Dominican order, but in the Philippines. Anyway, there's a scene in it. Dominic, radical dude, radical dude. Anyway, one of the original Dominicans, he says to him, you know, like, I'm not like you, Dominic. I can't do this. You want me to go out with nothing into the fields and preach with nothing. He just looks at him. This is a guy that got it. He said, and he did get it. He said, Lawrence, you will do great things. And he did. Later on in the movie, he founded a Dominican monastery. Dominic himself found himself there. And he's introducing him to all these young novices. The guy that was afraid. You see, this is what we all, if we just stepped out of the boat and trusted God, but we don't. We conform our lives to this mediocre world and live mediocre lives. We take no chances, none. We don't risk anything. We calculate everything. You don't do anything in life if you take risks. And I'll tell you this, it's sure, that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. But if you bank on God and you stick your neck out on the line for God, he will always come through for you. And I'll tell you this, your life will bear fruit. I've seen this with my own eyes, in my own stupid little way.
That's a perfect example that you just gave, you know, about the in India, a place that, again, according to for order, you know, according to the way the world looks at things, those lepers should have all been dead, starved to death, not been able to eat or whatever. And here they are making saris and creating, you know, clothes that they could turn around and trade and get food, and they have housing and they have water and they're not dying, and not because life is easy, but a little bit of radical trust. And believe me, Joe, I have a hard time. It's one of my sins. You know, I don't trust in God the way I should. Sometimes I get in my own head and I want to do things my way. Now, thank God, he usually straightens me out. But that is so, I'm glad you brought it up. We got to go to a break. That is so our problem. We just think that with everything going on, we could just do it all ourselves. If we would just change that view, I dare say we might start to get a response from the Almighty. So you're listening to the Crusade Channel. You're home for the Mike Church Show, Crusade Channel News, the Barrett Brief, and Kennedy Profession. From sun up to sundown, the Crusade Channel is the last live radio station standing. Stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello, way in the breach on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. And Joe, so we were talking about heroes like St. Dominic and St. Francis. Unfortunately, when you're talking about heroes, you always got to talk about some villains too. So where are we headed next?
We're going to China. Little
Oh, a lot of
Xi
villains there.
Jinping.
A lot of villains there.
Well, Lee Edwards of the Federalists brings us this one. He basically is asserting that the president, or what do you call him? Is he the president of China, Xi Jinping? Like, what does he
I
call
think he
himself?
calls himself a president. He's about as much of a president as Joe Biden is. Okay.
But
Basically,
Xi Jinping asserts that the Communist Party and its socialist ideologies are the primary drivers of his policies, which, by the way, include slave labor and torture. So Edwards opines on what America should do in response to this. By the way, America will do none of the sort. Let me just first say that.
Yeah.
But let's just talk about what Lee Edwards said America should do. And frankly, I think these are some really good points. The United States should organize and host a summit for democracy and countries to commit to defending against authoritarianism and advancing human rights at home and abroad. We don't even do that in our own country, advance human rights, because we are for abortion. But that's a story for another day. He goes on. It should create a ministry on religious freedom. We violate religious freedom left and right here, but this is what he said we should do, modeled after the ministry pioneered by former Ambassador Sam Brownback to advance religious freedom in China and around the globe. The United States should forge closer relationships with Taiwan and India. It should negotiate free trade agreements with Taiwan and Japan and other key partners in the Indo-Pacific region. The U.S. Agency for Global Media should strengthen its messaging in countering Beijing's public opinion warfare. And finally, the United States should request the International Olympic Committee to review Communist China's suitability to host the 2022 Olympics because of, obviously, its human rights violation. We talk about the Uyghurs, which the Muslim population, which frankly are in concentration camps in China. Right. I mean, look what they've done to the folks in Hong Kong. We covered the story about the billionaire. What's that gentleman's name in Hong Kong who China basically...
Jimmy Lai.
There you go. I mean, but yet, frankly, I think people are afraid of China, even America for that matter. I think they kowtow. You see it. You see it in corporations. I mean, you talk about this is hypocrisy at its highest level. Corporations have embraced in America the LGBTQ agenda. Do you know that agenda in China, those same corporations, they have to modify that messaging? Sure. We covered that last week. Right. How? This is where I don't know how people don't pick up on this. How superficial all this crap is.
Donald Trump did. Donald Trump did. Let's be clear. Donald Trump at least stood up to China. He at least stood in their way somewhat. Again, as much as we want. You know what? Alliances are what we need against China. We need economic alliances, trade partnerships with real countries that we could trade with. They help us, we help them, and exclude China from that trade. And when they complain to the international community, go up against those go up in front of those fakos at the United Nations and say, number one, we're not listening to you. And number two, if you want us to listen to you, then you need to start sanctioning China on their human rights abuses. Somebody go to and get them to reverse their policy when it comes to China. That's a whole other conversation, okay? And how the real Catholic Church in China is underground, because that's where Xi Jinping put them. And you got a puppet Catholic Church with puppet bishops of the state. So that's a problem too. Why should we be afraid of China? There's more freedom-loving people in the world, more people who embrace the good than these scumbag Marxist values. Not that you could consider them values, but you understand my point. In other words, there's more people in the world that understand the Chinese are not somebody to do business with. You don't partner with them. You don't negotiate with them. You make alliances with other groups that agree with you, and you exclude China. And let the Chinese go and go. I want to see, here's one thing about the Muslim world that bothers me more than anything else. The Muslims know that there's 1 million Uyghurs in China that are getting abused, that their labor is being stolen, And after they're done stealing their labor, they kill these people. Okay. You mentioned torture, you mentioned rape and all of that. Okay. And yet the Muslims, they do business with the Chinese. Well, why are you doing business with the Chinese if you're Iran? Your brother Muslims are getting killed over there, and you're doing business with Xi Jinping? Seriously. Seriously. China's a big problem, and they weren't a big problem. We allowed them to be a big problem. And you can put that blame at Bill Clinton and people like him when they debated in the 90s about most favored nation. They should have never been a most favored nation. They should have never been allowed to rise up. The Soviet Union collapses, and now we have this scumbag country that gets risen, that we raise up, and now they're a world power. They respect nothing, Joe Resinello. They don't respect God or man. They respect nothing, the Chinese Communist Party. And we have to tolerate them? LeBron James, I have to worry about. He's going to miss out on a few bucks if we criticize the Communist Chinese Party. And I blame America. I blame us.
Let's talk about this. You know, we only have a few minutes, well, about 10 minutes left, give or take. I want to talk a little bit about this story and First Things about the sexual revolution, particularly about pornography. I think it's an important conversation. Samuel James brings it to us from First Things. He's addressing a situation. I didn't even know about this, frankly. It's called OnlyFans. It's a crowdfunding platform invented specifically for amateur pornography, basically. It's basically its members are announcing a ban on sexually explicit material, Joe Pasillo, supposedly as a per.
No, OnlyFans came out and they banned sexually explicit material.
Okay,
the problem is the people on the site, that's what they're there for. So they reacted against that. And go ahead, but that's what it is. It's the people that were on the site that are reacting against OnlyFans, because OnlyFans basically said, "Well, we want to ban sexually explicit material," and the people that are on the site said, "No." But go ahead.
But this is what James kind of highlights, and this is something I just wanted to speak to a little bit. Sexual libertinism often leads to usury. People don't think about that, but I think it's very true. This is a vastly underappreciated aspect of its nature. This is what James had to say. And he said, someone who saw it clearly was C.S. Lewis. I thought this was an interesting quote. This is in 1943 in a broadcast that Lewis basically gave, and it was part of his book, Mere Christianity. This is what he said. There are people who want to keep our sexual instinct inflamed in order to make money out of us. Because, of course, a man with an obsession is a man who has very little sales resistance. That is so true. And I'm going to tell you this right now. The porn business, it's $1 billion business. This is arguably the greatest export of America right now. Arguably, one of the biggest exports of the United States of America is pornography.
Joe, let me ask you a question. When people want to question, look, I think Muslims are off the deep end. Okay, I think they have been since their founding. I'd be the first one to say that. But if I'm a Muslim father in the Middle East, I hate America. And you know why I hate America? Stop trying to export pornography to my country. Stop. I don't want it. I don't want my children seeing it. I want to protect my family from it. I certainly don't want my daughters seeing it. I don't blame these people sometimes for really disliking America and sometimes hating us when this is our biggest export is pornography. And we can't do anything about it because people like Alan Dershowitz stood up in front of the Supreme Court in the middle of the 1970s and said, no, it's protected speech under the First Amendment to the Constitution. No, it's not, Mr. Dershowitz. I don't care if you went to Harvard. Pornography is not protected speech.
You know what it is? I've always said this. It brings no value.
Zero.
In fact, it hurts society. You see, this is like one of those things. Like, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And people don't understand that in America. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. It brings no value. In fact, it actually detracts from value. Pornography destroys marriage.
Joe, then what we need to do, okay, if the government's not going to do anything about pornography, believe me when I tell you, again, this goes back to what our argument is about contraception. You'll get a lot of pushback from conservatives if you try to ban pornography in America. Trust me on that.
Oh, that's
Okay.
a given.
A lot of conservative men have the stash of porn in their basement when they get a little bored at midnight and they wake up. Okay. If you know what I mean, without to get too graphic. But what we need to do, one thing I would say is this: we need to bring back shame in this country. We need to bring back shame. Okay. In other words, we don't applaud people who say, "Oh yeah, I went to the I don't want to use the word. I went to the strip joint the other night with the boys." Yeah, but you're a married man. What are you doing? What are you doing throwing dollars at naked women for? We need to bring back a little bit of shame and let them call you judgmental. Let them call you judgmental. You got a wife and kids. What are you doing? What are you doing throwing dollar bills at some broad's breasts on Route 17? In Bergen County. In other words, same thing with porn. When are we going to start to explain to people? One thing, a phrase that James uses in this article, Joe, that I wanted to bring up. He's talking about obviously the liberated sexual self. He says the vision of it turns out to be nothing more than an ambition for enslavement to ruthless forms of commercialism. These scumbags that promote pornography in America, Joe, what do you think it comes down to? What C.S. Lewis said, what you alluded to. They want to make money off you. And how do you do that? Well, we said earlier, bring down the man's defenses. How do you do that? Well, I watch a show. I'm not watching pornography, but I try out, let's say, a new show that's on. It seems to be a decent show, all right? A detective story. Okay, nothing too bad about it, maybe some foul language. And smack dab in the middle of the first episode is a sex scene. Why was that there? Why was that there? I was enjoying a detective story. What purpose was this sex scene? The purpose of the sex scene was to get me to turn off that and to turn on the porn because they need to weaken men. That's what the porn industry is about because it's run by the devil. They need to weaken men. If men stood up against porn, we would be a lot stronger in this country.
It's funny. I saw the one episode. The Knights of Columbus recently put out a series called Into the Breach. Obviously, that's one of Joe and I's taglines for the show, and we created that 3 years ago. And it's based upon this particular series by the Knights is Olmsted's apostolic letter, Into the Breach. I recommend all men read it. Basically in it, the episode that I saw, it really resonated with me. In it, a priest said, the devil wants the man out of the way because that's how he attacks the family. He wants the husband out of the way. You see, the husband is standing in between the devil and the family, the man in the house. And one of the ways the devil does that is through pornography.
Absolutely.
I'm going to tell you that right
Absolutely.
now. And this is one of the greatest mistakes that men, you see, it's even championed. I mean, you saw shows like what the hell with Al Bundy. I mean, like, right. Dopey husband, hand down his pants, sitting in front of the television, looking at porn.
Right.
I'm going to be honest with you. That is the mistake, because I tell you this, people fall into it. You become impotent. That's another thing. I mean, if you're so focused on sex, I got news for you. If you are basically addicted to porn, you lose interest in your wife.
Joe, why do you think, I was just going to say, you lose interest in your wife. Why do you think it leads to, why do you think porn is
divorce?
A destroyer of marriages? Because a guy's got some idealized version. Again, idealized. We're talking about a bunch of hookers, basically, when you look at these women, okay? But they're physically speaking, they're attractive, okay? They look at these women, they fantasize about these women, they do not look at their wife in the same way, and they get turned off to their wife. And then what do? Well, they got to get their thrill somehow. Then they end up going out and just trying to going to a bar or go and get a hooker or whatever the case might be because they want to have that. The wife finds out and boom, you're divorced. I got a friend of mine went through exactly what I just described. He's a friend. I love him. He's divorced with 2 kids. Why? Because he doesn't know how to control his passions. and then justifies to me why it was good what he did when he cheated on his wife. And I said, but you have 2 kids. What are you talking about? He says, well, you're being a little judgmental. I said, well, maybe. You got 2 kids. I said, some piece of ass that you met at a football game that your son was playing in, you're gonna let that woman destroy your marriage, destroy your father. Well, I'm always going to be a good father to my kids. Not when you're not with your wife.
Well, let's.
And this is and I say this, Joe, in a judgmental way, because yes, that type of stuff needs to be judged. We're not talking about falling. We're not talking about falling into temptation. That happens to anybody. It's when you not just fall into temptation, you embrace it. And that's what pornography does. It makes men embrace that deviancy. And that's what leads to destruction.
Well, Samuel James says this. He says, by contrast, the much maligned Christian version of sexual chastity, faithfulness, and self-control is a spectacularly pro-human vision. The bodies of a husband and wife do not belong to shareholders, but to each other. The fruits of their passion are not customers, but children. And the place they build is not an industry, but a home, pulsating with the same love that reverberates between the crucified Christ and his redeemed church. You see, again, it comes down to you don't understand who you are unless you have God in your life. I read that last line and I said to myself, the average secular humanist that read that, they said, crucified Christ and his redeemed church. A husband and wife lay down their life for each other in different ways, but they both do. You see, that's the proper idea of marriage. If you're not in it, if you look at marriage and you say to yourself, what am I going to get out of it? And that's the way a lot of people look at it going in. What am I going to get out of it? As opposed to what am I going to give to it, which is everything, meaning your whole person. I got news for you. You're behind the 8 ball before you even start. And that is why marriages fail. You cannot have a successful marriage, in my view, without God. And frankly, to do that, you cannot do that without God, because it goes against our very nature of who we are as humans, all of us, even the best of us. The best of us. It's impossible. It's impossible. We are all flawed. Everyone. Concupiscence runs through our veins. You can't do that without God. And that's why marriage is a sacrament. And that's why marriage is failing left and right, because it's not treated as a sacrament. It's not treated as a sacrament. Even in the Catholic faithful of America, quote unquote faithful, they all contracept, Joe. You're not living a sacramental marriage if you're contracepting, if you're not open to life. You're basically saying something to your wife without saying it. What you're saying is this: I'm using you. I'm using you for pleasure and you're using me, and we're both fine with that. You don't think that bleeds into other aspects of your marriage? Of course it does. And those other aspects of your marriage rot your marriage.
That's right.
That's where we're at.
Well, that's why we as Catholic men and what we do at the Frontline with Joe and Joe and many other people out there, whether it be you could do it on a radio show like the Crusade on the Crusade channel, or you know, in any other venue you can. When people say, "Well, I watch porn," say, "Well, you're a slave." I've said that to somebody in the past. In other words, because I'm familiar with the problem. I've been an open book about that. Okay, I'm familiar with the problem. I said, "You're a slave." What do you mean? So you're a slave. In other words, anybody who watches porn, if they can't, they need to come to the realization, whether self-realization or somebody tells them, you are a slave. Sexual liberation is political control. And if you look at this article by Samuel James, because obviously we point out on the show all the time, E. Michael Jones wrote the book, okay, on sexual liberation and political control, libido dominandi. But James, you know, he points out. Talking about ruthless forms of commercialism. You're a slave. You don't have any resistance to the crap that they try to sell you so that they can make more money. You have no resistance to these people when you're addicted to pornography. when you just let yourself be overtaken by this thing, and it is an addiction, Joe. All right, it releases dopamine. All right, which is the reason why it becomes addicting. All right, so it's like doing cocaine. There's diminishing returns. Okay, in other words, you're never going to get as high as you did the first time. In other words, and it's the same thing, and you just continue to become a slave. And the only way out of it, I don't care what anybody says. I don't care what the atheist says. I don't care what anybody says. The only way out of it is Christ. The only way out of, because that is a bad addiction, Joe Restinello.
Well, I'm glad you
Pornography
said
is
that.
a bad addiction.
Because there's a way out of everything, and it is through Christ. First thing you do is go to confession. And frankly, with anything that you're addicted to, it just doesn't, you don't just snap your fingers and get out of it. You work on it. And frankly, God gives you grace. People might laugh at that. Secular humanists, they'll laugh at that. What are you talking about? God's a magician? No, grace is real. Go to confession and pray and fast. Listen, people who want to achieve things, you want to achieve something, you go to law school, you study, you take tests, you spend money, you make an investment in a degree, you do well. Well, it's the same thing with regard to your soul. Invest in your soul. It's like an athlete. You want to run a marathon, you don't just get out there and run 26.1 miles. You got to practice. You got to run every day, rain, heat, the whole deal. Sun, it doesn't matter. Well, the thing is, you got to work on it. Fast, pray, go to confession. And you know something? You can break any habit. Lent is a good time to start. Advent, which will be coming up in a few months, it's a good time. It's a mini Lent. Work on it. Build discipline within yourself. You'll be surprised what you could accomplish with God. You really would. And frankly, you're only going to help yourself. You see, listen, you're only going to help yourself. You're only going to help your family. You know, nothing, you know, I say this, me and my wife talk about this all the time. Everyone wants a good life. Everybody, let's be honest. But not everyone has a good life. I'll tell you why, because it takes work. You don't magically have a good life. You don't. You don't.
And the size of the bank book is not the final determination of that.
No, it takes work. And what is that work? To be honest with you, the work is the work of God in you. You're made for God. Everyone is. And frankly, nobody, listen, doesn't matter. You could be the simplest person or the smartest person, the strongest person or the weakest person. With God, anything is possible. Anything. And he can help you. But you have to avail yourself to it. Just like an athlete. An athlete doesn't just win the Super Bowl. A lot of practice. You don't just win the NBA Finals. A lot of practice. Saints. You don't just go strolling, like as Father George, good priest, told me this. He said, Joe, you don't just float into heaven. You got to put your effort into it.
Hey, listen, St. Paul said it. He says, work out your salvation in fear and trembling, okay? In other words, you got to work it out. That doesn't mean you earn heaven. I know Protestants love to, you know, mischaracterize.
I know. I was thinking that as I said it.
Right. We don't, but Paul said, work out your salvation in fear and trembling. Remember something, Joe, and we'll end it with this. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. One thing America needs right now is a little fear of the Lord. Any final thoughts?
Our will and God's grace working together could do amazing things.
Well, that's the Catholic way. We know that that's the Catholic way. That's why the Catholic Church teaches we need to cooperate with God's grace, both on an individual level and on a societal level. So let's pray, Joe, that people will start cooperating with God's grace. Thank you for listening to us on the Crusade Channel, your home for the Mike Church Show, Crusade Channel News, the Barrett Brief, and the Kennedy Profession from sun up to sundown. The Crusade Channel is the last live